clothes and stuff didn't have the ability to make them. MHM. At 65, Tom Moore finally confirms what fans suspected all along. You need to hear this. It's the absolute shocker of the century. Previously, all fans had hunches, but there was no way to prove it. Now Tom is out with this news. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because what's unfolding around Tom Moore's family is sending shockwaves through the entire Mountain Men community. Some of Tom's family members called the fan speculators and asked them to focus on their lives. Although the spotlight was on Tom, his family didn't seem fazed. Tom kept silent and would not grant an interview about the rumors swirling around his family and the recent police raid in his cabin. His wife and children were not bothered by the public ridicule. They never thought the truth would come out. However, in an unexpected turn of events, the Mountain Men cast is out to tell it all. There have been mixed emotions and heightened tension following Tom's announcement of his exit from the show and the raid at his homestead. Tom was neither a regular celebrity nor a rookie on television. He was one of the big players, and it meant one thing. His decisions had a significant impact on the television network. Of course, the History Channel would do all it could to protect one of its top cast members. Only a few had the experience that Tom had, and that meant he couldn't simply leave whenever he wanted. However, there's more about this story that you don't know. Tom couldn't bear to hide the truth anymore. The chaos behind the scenes got out of hand, and even though he tried to cover it up, he soon learned that you can never hide the truth. It's like steam from a hot cup of coffee. It always seeps out. It's too visible to be ignored. It was at this moment that the viewers realized that they'd been deceived, or rather kept in the dark. Tom told a story different from what they had thought was true. It was hard to take in. Many fans who loved the show and supported Tom began to question everything they had believed. What was real about Tom's life? Why did he choose to follow this path? Was it worth it? Why didn't he leave sooner? The rodeo cowboy of Yak Valley, Northwest Montana, dropped a bombshell at 65 and fans did not see it coming. Tom revealed that several events made him leave Mountain Men. He thought he could beat the constant pressure from the team. He thought he could pretend like they wanted him to. He thought that he was protecting his family from the threats he would face for choosing to remain silent. But he was wrong. It got worse. And the final blow was the demise of his daughter. If only he had known, he would have taken a stand and gotten his family out of the spotlight. He would have been firm on his decision to quit sooner. Tom thought the hustle from modern life was fascinating. It was even more thrilling when cameras followed him around as he documented this journey. What he never expected was for things to turn dark so quickly. Every episode in season premiere took a piece of Tom, one he couldn't recover. At first, trapping, tanning hides, and creating unique crafts from materials found in nature seemed like an honest means of earning a living. There was nothing wrong with that. His wife, Nancy, also thought they had the dream life. What more could they have asked for? They didn't mind living in the same big cabin built by hand more than 40 years ago. Moved out here in the dead of winter, which I wouldn't do now after he sold all his muskrats. They had no intention of ever leaving. The rugged landscape never posed challenges that they couldn't handle. Tom had this thought until things went downhill and he found himself in a dark hole with no sign of help. Although he was popular and surrounded by people, there was no one to rescue him. The upcoming 14th season of Mountain Men will be Tom's last appearance on the series. He announced that his journey with the History Channel project had come to an end. The moment the news hit the internet, the fans were taken aback. None of them thought they would soon bid farewell to one of the show's longest-running stars. They couldn't lay their hands on it, but they knew it wasn't the usual retirement. Something was off about Tom's announcement. Following the press release, several questions arose. Some fans angrily demanded answers from Tom, while others felt heartbroken at his reveal. The show's critics never have anything good to say about it. While they thought it was time for Tom to take a bow from the front line to allow a new cast, they also noticed how unusual it was for him to exit the show. There have been several interviews, clips, and scenes where Moore declared his love for the series and the life he had. Although I had to toil endlessly on my craft and for my family's survival in the mountains, it was an amazing life. I've enjoyed every bit of my time on the show, And as long as I can still do it, yes, I'm going to do it. These were Tom's words. He never saw a reason to back down from the series. Although some days were grueling, Tom took up the challenge and was ready to stick it out. These are not just rumors. These are Tom's words. In one episode, he shared how he and Nancy resolved to keep their identities as cast members of Mountain Men. He said, "We had no idea what we were getting into or how I was going to make a living out in the wild in the constant camera watch. However, I just had a feeling that, by God, we can do it. We can get it done." The recent press release didn't sound like Tom's usual enthusiastic remarks. There was a cold expression on his face as he told the world of his departure. His words conveyed more meaning for those who cared to read between the lines. It was so obvious that things had fallen apart. Tom had turned his back on reality television. And it wasn't because he was old and dealing with weak knees. Fans who had known Tom could tell how displeased he looked. It seemed like he had more to say, but he restrained. The fans demanded answers. They had been in the shadows for too long and wanted the truth. They called out Tom and asked for the whole story, saying they deserved to be in on what's happening. Some fans asked if Tom was in any danger. Was he facing threats? Over the years, he's faced tragedies, but they watched him handle them all well on television. Was that a facade? Did Tom put up a show about the reality of things? How long did he put up the disguise? How many of his scenes portrayed a false reality? Tom kept getting tags for these questions. He couldn't take it anymore. Fans and critics were not only attacking him, but they also spread lies about his family. This was where Tom drew the line. At first, Tom was angry that people thought the worst of him. He could understand how he went from being celebrated to facing public ridicule. He responded to the fans with 10 words that threw them into a frenzy. What did he mean by these words? The viewers were not overreacting. There was something truly unusual about what Tom said. At first, the words sounded simple, but there was more to the story. It was time for me to quit, so I did. Fans couldn't understand what Tom meant by his departure time. They recalled him celebrating the series' success and his plans to keep the viewers entertained for as long as he could. Now, the story seemed to have taken a turn. Tom Moore left Mountain Men after 14 seasons. The Mountain Men's top cast retired from the series. The longest-standing cast member turned his back on the show. These were the headlines on blogs and news outlets. After what seemed like an eternity, Tom came out with the truth, and it was unbelievable. His reasons for backing out of the series had everything to do with the old rusty cabin and the demise of his daughter. It's hard to quit anything that you really like to do. However, when the weight is too much to bear and the price comes at a cost you can't pay, you must let go. The incident at the cabin and the departure of my little girl changed everything. Tom said these words in an open speech in the video he released to tell his side of the story. There was nothing pleasant about how he had begun the video. Although it sounded disturbing, every word drew the fans in. The quest to find out why Tom would give up something so precious, a dream he had always held. These thoughts kept the fans glued to the video. His decision to leave the series didn't just happen. There were hints, but perhaps the fans were slow to catch on. There had been news of new cast members on the series. Everyone knew it was not always that the new cast made their debut. However, it seemed the production crew was deliberate about introducing these casts to the audience earlier on before filming ended. Fans found it unusual, but they thought the channel had finally chosen to carry the viewers along and keep them entertained. Others thought they were teasers to keep the fans locked in. Little did they know it was planned to get the viewers' attention. Tom had made up his decision to leave with the executives. They were not having it. Their answer was clear and short. "Tom, you can't leave at a time like this." These words carried so much weight. Tom felt threatened, so he stayed back. He wasn't willing to risk his family getting hurt. He had just lost his child and wasn't about to lose something dear to him. Tom's legacy hung in the balance as he confronted this defining crossroad. What decision would he make? Will he choose to stay despite all that has happened? Or will he muster the courage and walk out? As these thoughts weighed heavily on Tom, the production crew stepped into action. They had sounded a warning to Tom, but they couldn't trust his actions. They knew how rugged the old man was, and they also had no idea what he was capable of. They didn't want Tom switching up on them. It would mean they would take a hit and ultimately lose everything. Ratings, viewership, and sponsors. They couldn't let that happen. They had to bring in the new cast while Tom was in the picture. They wanted the audience to warm up to these stars even before the filming period was over. Then came the clips, thrillers, and ads. Chance and Sura Painter were introduced to viewers. The couple called out a homestead in remote Alaskan bush country while raising 2 young children. The clips portrayed the young couple's unpredictable terrain and daily survival. It also portrayed Tom's continuous fight against the elements and his several moments with. He helped them insulate their log cabin with moss from the surrounding forest. They also showed Tom helping out another couple as they used an age-old technique to hunt moose by boat on an isolated river. When the video was released, the fans were elated. No one saw it as a scripted plan by the production crew. They didn't question that Tom was in every clip where the new cast featured. They couldn't tell that the production needed their endorsement, and the only way to do that was to have Tom appear with them. He was a fan favorite, which meant the audience would welcome the newcomers. The executives built the show around people who have traded the comforts of the modern world for a life off the grid. Scene after scene, it portrays how the cast navigates the ups and downs of life in the wilderness. Among these survivalists stood the resilient Tom. The fans had grown to love him, and that meant he was an asset to the production crew. It's why they could not take his decision to leave lightly. It was either they made him stay or leveraged the opportunities they had. It all blew up when Tom insisted on exiting the series. He was never fazed by life in the wilderness. He loved it. He had pledged to continue to fight to live wild and free in the mountains. However, it seemed impossible. Everything happened so fast, and the change took more from Tom than he could ever imagine. He never believed he would sit in front of a camera to share the most devastating moment of his life. He didn't even know where to begin. The strict rules imposed by dictators or supposed shareholders of the series, the threats to stay silent, and the huge money offers to keep him in check. Where does Tom begin his story? While the production team went through their usual ads informing viewers of new episodes of Mountain Men and the streaming platforms of the History Channel, Tom sat in utter despair. He couldn't believe how much his life had changed since he accepted the offer from his neighbor Tim Lennon to attend a fishing show. Tom never asked Tim to mention him to the staff at Springs Production. The staff had thought Tom Moore would be perfect for the new reality series on the History Channel. The day the production team drove to see him was the turning point. He had agreed to film just 1 day of his life. This shouldn't cause any harm, Tom thought to himself. He wasn't willing to change his routine to impress anyone, and he certainly wasn't ready to turn his back on the simple life he had. He loved the journey of hunting, trapping, tanning hides, and surviving the harsh Montana winters. This was just enough for him. How little Tom knew about the change in his life. He never expected the series' viewers to want more. He wondered why they were fascinated by his daily life. They seemed to enjoy how calm and precise he was about taking actions. They somehow loved his life in the wilderness. He was grateful for that. He couldn't believe how much they appreciated his craft of tanning hides with animal brains. He was fascinated that they enjoyed watching him craft knives and bows from raw materials and how he sewed his clothes from buckskin. His trapping skills were great. All of these were not surprising to Tom. It was just his way of getting by, and he was never interested in cameras, nor did he expect the production to return with another offer. As Tom sat in silence, reliving the experience, he wondered if things would have turned out differently had he not taken the offer. What turn would his life have taken if he had just turned down the offer? The producers thought he was a game-changer for the series. He knew they saw him as a money bank, one who would draw millions of viewers. Tom didn't care about that. He didn't want a drastic switch in his life. As much as he could, he tried to keep control over that. He knew the moment he took the offer from the production, he would lose that. So he turned it down. Yes, it was the best choice. However, the attention grew beyond what Tom imagined. It started with little stares when he walked into a local feed store, the prying eyes when he walked down the road. Then came the biggest hit of all, the hundreds of people who made long trips to his remote cabin in the summer. At first, Tom thought they had mistaken his cabin for a museum. He soon realized that they were fans of Mountain Men. They weren't just viewers of the series, they were his fans. He couldn't believe that they would come all the way into the Kootenay National Forest, 4 miles from the Canadian border and 15 miles from the Idaho line. They did all that just to see him. Felt like a dream. There were no GPS or phone signals. All the streets had endless trees, lumpy roads, and silence. Yet, the fans traveled out into the wild, hoping not only to get a photo or autograph with Tom, but also to breathe the same air he did and learn about his motivations. For a moment, the attention seemed great. However, Tom soon realized that he was getting swooned into the world that he had desperately fought to stay out of. His once serene world was slipping away. The click of a camera now replaced peaceful morning walks. Evenings were no longer quiet, interrupted by unexpected knocks on the door. Strangers roamed the woods, hoping to catch a glimpse of their wilderness life. This intrusion extended to his family, with Nancy and the kids thrust into the unwanted spotlight. However, they couldn't say no. They didn't have much of a choice. Daily, they saw people at their cabin. One couple traveled all the way from Switzerland for their honeymoon just to find Tom. Others came from Germany, England, and across the United States. They brought gifts, told stories about how Tom had inspired them, and said things like, "We came to Montana just to find you." The once silent valley became a destination for wilderness pilgrims. Small businesses in the area noticed the change, and tourism boomed, even during snowstorms. This made it harder for Tom to refuse the offer the production crew made on their second visit. How could he say no when there were more people involved? The fans kept commenting about his feature in the next season. His neighbors thanked him for making their local homestead a place of attraction and the boom in their business. How could Tom refuse the production offer? At this point, he had to stay gracious, keep a warm smile, appreciate visitors, and promise them that he would be back on their screens. The peaceful home that he and Nancy had built became a solace for foreigners. The sounds of birds and flowing water were suddenly replaced by the hum of car engines and the chirping of fans. On the surface, it seemed exciting, but it wasn't the life Tom wanted. He knew that he was slowly losing control of things, and there was no way he could get things back to normal. Even if he could, it was a hard choice to make. How could he stand his angry neighbors when they hear that he caused their business losses? How would he cope with the constant pressure from fans persuading him to get on the series? How would he and Nancy get back to the private life they've always cherished? These were difficult choices. Tom was in a tight spot and felt like he was in the middle of a peace resolution between two countries at war. There was no going back. Tom had to make a choice. He accepted the offer and became a big cast member on Mountain Men. As his fame grew, Tom felt a greater need to be away from the public. Each new fan and tourist was a reminder of the life he missed. The quiet rhythm he once worked so hard to create was gone. Wildlife, lots of birds, all the things of nature that feed. In its place was noise and sophisticated cameras watching his every move. This was the moment he realized that they were not going back. He either had to get used to the life or find other moments of comfort. Despite the internal struggle, Tom never brought that energy to the viewers. He never spoke with anger and was always honest about his craft. He stayed grateful to those who cared and never avoided the hard questions. Still, it wasn't what he wanted. He became so deeply immersed in reality television that it was too late to turn back. Even when he struggled to find his way out, he met opposition. As Tom watched his manager set up the camera so he could share his story, thoughts clouded his mind. If he had known he would end up losing everything he loved, perhaps he would have treaded carefully. Perhaps he would never have accepted the offer. The series gave him so much, yet it took more than Tom was willing to give. Was it worth it? Did I make the right choice? Why didn't I protect my family as I promised? The thoughts flooded his mind. It took a great deal of courage for Tom to make the video. He was never bothered by the camera following him around. However, this time, the camera was going to show a side of him the world had never seen. The camera was going to capture the truth, and that scared Tom. For a split second, he wondered if he was doing the right thing. As soon as the thought came, it washed off like the sands on the shore. Now all Tom had was regret. It was the only emotion he could feel. He wondered how different life would have been if he had just stayed true to the life he was familiar with. Now he was no longer afraid. He didn't feel the need to hide or remain silent about the pressure he had faced over the years. Yak was remote and nearly forgotten. The roads were rough and sometimes the winter lasted 6 months. There were no emergency services. Living in the homestead felt like isolation, but it was thrilling for Tom. It was a challenge that he was willing to take on, and he excelled at it. Although the cold was harsher than anything he could